Hey, thank you for joining me for today's episode with Kabir. Before we begin, I wanted to let you know what's new. A couple of things. I released a new library to write Swift code. So if you're somebody who's interested in making macros or any sort of dynamic code in Swift, you'll definitely want to check out Syntax Kit. The link to that will be in the show notes. You should consider subscribing to the newsletter because that's free, but you should also consider being a Patreon. It's like $3 right now per month. We already have the next episode posted on Patreon with Rachel Brindle, where we talk about Swift testing. So if you want early access to the next episode, you'll definitely want to make sure you join the Patreon, patreon.com/brightdigit. And that's about it. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome to another episode of Empower Apps. I'm your host, Leo Dion. Today, I'm joined by Kabir Oberai. Kabir, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a few exciting weeks for you, right? So, not only do we have WWDC week, but you graduated. Is that correct?
That's correct. Last week.
Congratulations. Welcome to the workforce in 2025. Um, before we begin, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. So I was a student at the University of Waterloo. Um, I just graduated with a degree in computer science, and I've been interested in iOS development for as long as I can remember. I started iOS in like 2013. Just because I wanted to make apps, iOS apps seemed pretty cool. And then I learned Objective-C, and a year later Swift came out, and I was like, what did I do all of this for? But it was pretty I'm glad I learned Objective-C, and I'm glad that Swift came out as well. And I was a WWDC scholar in 2017. And I've developed some fun projects over the years, which I think we will be talking about soon. Um, One other thing worth mentioning is I've been in the workforce in and out for a bit. I was previously at texts.com, which is a startup. We got acquired by Automatic, the guys behind WordPress and Tumblr. And then more recently, I joined Ramp, which is a fintech based in New York.
Okay, awesome. Well, congratulations. Um, so today we're going to talk about what came out at WWDC and stuff like that. But we're also going to talk about a little tool you've made called xTool. Um, Before we get into xTool, let's jump back and do talk about WWDC. What were some things that you were particularly interested in, or what were things that you were fascinated by, I guess?
Um, there was a bit. There was quite a bit. I think elephant in the room, the liquid glass stuff is definitely very nice to see. I love the gloopiness. I love all the the move towards sort of skeuomorphism to an extent. Um, it's Yeah, it does definitely like make designing harder in my opinion. Because there was this sweet spot of a few years where you could just like whiteboard anything and like drop it in Figma, and you'd have like a really nice iOS design. But now you have to think about all of these little effects and stuff.
Right, right.
I do hope that we get some good tools for that. But designing in Swift UI is also a pretty good approach to take. I'm pretty excited by the foundation model stuff as well. Um,
Have you had a chance to
and
play around with it yet?
Not exactly. So I was poking around one of the Xcode betas a few months ago. So like not the 26 cycle, but I think it was a 16, Xcode 16 cycle. And I noticed this generable macro in one of the Xcode 16 betas. Yeah. So that's when I poked around with it actually. I think it was entitlement gated at that point. Like I don't think it was like fully usable because it also like pulled in it was just the macros that they accidentally included. But I was like, okay, this is definitely gonna lead to something interesting in Xcode 26.
and,
Um,
and we know that now. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, not 26 at the time. Everyone thought it would be 17. The release numbering is also an interesting change. It's definitely nicer. I can't wait to see. I mean, I'm the mess that's going to be created with the minor versioning though, because like, you've solved the major versioning, but
What do you think they're
like,
going to do with the minor versioning? I mean, I would just assume that we're going to see
yeah,
26.1, 26.2, and
yeah, I
it's still
think
going to go
I
the way it was before, right? As opposed to like
yeah,
months or something, that would be really confusing. I mean,
I would have,
I don't know. I guess that's kind of what like Ubuntu does that, right?
yeah.
So
My hot take is that months would actually be a nice approach to take. Um, because like if you're going to go with the Calvert approach, then just like go all in, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you
Actually, it would be because like they do pretty much release 26.1 in January, more or less. So it
Right.
would kind of
And
line
then
up.
that's true. That's true. And the way that they talk about releases usually is like if you look at some of the Swift internal sources, they talk about like the fall 2024 release or the spring 2024 release.
Right.
So I do hope that they do that. If anyone from Apple is listening,
Yeah, that actually is
it's
a good
not too
idea.
late.
Yeah. Cool. So let's talk about xTool. For those who don't know, I'll let you go ahead and explain exactly what it is.
So, at the moment, the main way to develop iOS apps or apps for Apple platforms is with Xcode, which is Apple's IDE. Um, and there's a lot of benefits to Xcode, of course, and you get your nice end-to-end vertical integration across Apple's stack. Um, but there are issues with it, right? And anytime you have a bug, it's not open source. It's hard to fix any of that stuff. Um, and sometimes you just need something more lightweight, or sometimes you want to do development on other platforms than macOS. And this is a problem that Xtool aims to solve. And in essence, xTool is a re-implementation of a lot of what Xcode does in a way that's fully open source and works across platforms, which means you can build iOS apps on macOS, Windows with WSL, and Linux.
Can you build anything in the any Apple platform?
Um, so the foundations for that are all in place. At the moment, I'm like the building step is primarily geared towards iOS stuff, but we actually do build the macOS SDK as well. Um, and I don't think it would be a stretch for us to support building like Vision OS and
Right. If you have the SDK,
WatchOS.
that's what you need, right?
Exactly, exactly. It's the bit that isn't done yet for like macOS, for example, is the macOS app bundle structure is slightly different from the iOS bundle structure. So for us to build Mac apps, we just have to like move some files around in different ways. But it's not too hard. It's not too hard. I actually added simulator support recently.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, so you can build for the simulator with xTool, which is especially useful when you're developing with xTool on Mac OS.
So, what are some things that um, you had to learn to get this going? What are some fundamentals for getting Xcode working, or I guess the build tools working in another OS?
I think this really, really pushed my like the extent of my knowledge on iOS, and also like it's been an amazing learning experience for me. So a little bit of historic context here actually is this started off as a project that I started building in around 2017. Um, so I was a part of the jailbreak community. Um, and in the jailbreak community, we had this build system called Theos. And this was the build system that allows you to build jailbreak tweaks, um, amongst other things. And it was completely detached from Xcode. It was based around GNU Make, which, if you've ever used Make, you can imagine is an absolute nightmare to deal with. Um, but the crux of it is somehow through a lot of glue and, patchwork, this build system supported building iOS apps on any platform. Um, which is like even on like native Windows, and on Linux. But it was specifically for jailbreak, because these apps weren't, there's this important step of code signing that you do with actual normal iOS apps that we weren't doing there. Um, so long story short, I eventually became one of the core maintainers of Theos. Um, and I learned a lot about how the plumbing works. I added Swift support to it. I added a bunch of other things to it. Um, and then the one question that kept sort of ringing in the back of my head was, why is this not accessible to more people? Why is it that only people in the jailbreak community have the fortune of being able to develop iOS apps, on any platform? Um, and around the same time, I was working on this other project called Supercharge, which was basically designed around side loading, so being able to install iOS apps, without going through the App Store. And like this, so Supercharge, in the end, there were a lot of roadblocks, and I kind of, decided to put a stop on it, because I was just a bit worried about, legal factors and other things. Um, it definitely is. Um, but I learned a lot from Supercharge as well, including, and I developed a lot of code there that was able to interact with Apple's developer services and take any app and sign it, provision it, get those certificates and profiles and all of those things that you need, and then sign it, and then also install it onto your device. Um, and some of the things I had to learn along the way there, besides the interacting with the developer APIs, was like to actually to install it onto your device. We had to emulate the same protocol that Xcode uses when you hit Command R and you install over Wi-Fi. Um, so yeah, lots of learning there for sure. And Anyway, eventually I realized I had these two pieces that were great. You had this Theos thing that was able to build iOS apps, but not install them onto a non-jailbroken device. And then you had the Supercharge thing that was able to sign apps and install them onto any device. And I was like, I could take my learnings from here and I could take some of the code from here even and sort of combine it into this one project. The third piece and the final piece that really fit in place was when Swift improved their support for cross compilation, with Swift Package Manager, Swift SDK support. So this is something that didn't really land until Swift 6.1 or 6.2 even. Um, yeah, it was just like last year basically, where this WWDC, in fact, they made a big show of how you can now build WebAssembly apps natively with Swift, right? Even Android apps, for that matter, is something you can build with Swift now.
Yes, which we've done an episode on.
Oh, you have. That's awesome. But yeah, so like all of those pieces were incredibly relevant here because I was able to build a Swift SDK, um, like we use for building Android apps, but this one can build iOS apps with Swift Package Manager. Um, and yeah, so, just combine all of those pieces and you get this end-to-end solution that can, build, provision, sign, and install an iOS app, from any platform.
So one of the things I think you mentioned was that there was like an open source. They had open source part of the build, Swift build. how it works with Xcode. Is that correct, or am I missing something?
So Swift build actually came along fairly late in this whole process. And it's confusing because there's Swift build, which is like the Swift space build command that you use to build with Swift Package Manager, and then you have Swift hyphen build, right? So Swift hyphen build is the Xcode thing. Um, and yeah, that has been open sourced fairly recently. I actually built all of this way before Swift build came around. Um, but I am looking into using Swift build to streamline most of this build process, and it's going to have a huge impact here for sure at some point. Um, it's actually like Swift Package Manager is currently working on integrating Swift build as their native build system, and once that happens, I'm we're going to have some benefits from that immediately, and then we're also going to be able to probably use that with xTool to remove some of the manual packaging code
Right, right,
and
right.
utilize
So
Swift build.
what is the difference between Swift space build and Swift dash build?
Swift space build is Swift package manager's build command, right?
Okay.
um, and until last year, it was entirely like custom. It did its own, coordination with the underlying Swift compiler. In fact, it now uses Swift dash build under the hood.
For
Um,
starting with Swift 6.1,
uh,
6.2.
6.2,
Okay.
and I say it uses it, but that's with an asterisk where it's an option that you can provide to make it use it.
Okay.
Um,
That's good to know.
Yeah, so you can actually like test it out now, but I think it's probably not going to be stable until I don't know Apple's timelines here,
Right,
but
right.
yeah.
It's funny you were mentioning jailbreaking and stuff because I recently read an article about the Hackintosh community and how they're kind of, now that we know Tahoe 26 will be the last Intel supported Mac, they're pretty much shutting down now because that was a big opening, was to be able to build for Intel, right, and do it on Intel. So it's funny you're mentioning now we can do build on Linux and Windows as well. To me, like what really attracts me to xTool is the CI option. um, if anybody knows, it's cheaper to run a Linux VM than it is to run a Mac VM. And so being able to do that would be absolutely, fantastic for the
Yeah,
community just to get the builds going and running.
yep, 100%. I just want to interject that real quick, and I do want to mention that with regards to the CI option, that's something I have been doing a lot of research into recently. I think the main blocker there is actually legal rather than technical. Now that Xtool exists, there isn't any technical blocker, but there might be a potential legal blocker, which is that Apple doesn't the the license agreement uh, asks that you use Mac OS to deploy apps. Um, so yeah, the way that I've been talking about Xtool is, yeah, we support Linux, we support Windows, we support Mac OS. Um, but as far as the license agreement goes, it does say you should be using Apple hardware. So, like, I've been using it within like Docker on Mac OS or even the new containerization stuff. I actually want to give that a spin soon. Um, and that's another thing I'm very excited about with this dub. Um, but I've been using it in a VM as well. There's there's like the rest of it is kind of open to legal interpretation. I'm not a lawyer, so yeah.
um,
Um, but it's very interesting, and I have actually I do actually know that it is possible to use this on CI on a Linux CI machine. Yeah, just got to figure out whether the law allows that.
right, right, exactly, exactly. Um, so what's the difference? What goes into building an app um, as opposed to like building a Swift package where you just compile Swift? What are the components of building an app that are required or that you learned that is going on in the background when you build an Xcode, you build an iOS app?
So when you build an iOS app, in fact, you can actually let's start with Mac OS here because that's the easy option. If you build a Mac OS executable, um, these days you use like your at main to mark the entry point. Um, if you import SwiftUI in a Mac OS executable and you like declare your main thing to be an app, like the app protocol, you can build a Mac OS app. You can turn any plain executable into a Mac OS app. Um, yeah, so like the bare minimum there is actually very little. Like you just need to import SwiftUI or UIKit or AppKit and then mark the either your app delegate or your app protocol with at main. Um, the bit that really matters after that is the bundling bit. So once you have an executable, you can run it on macOS and you can distribute a plain executable. But that doesn't work on iOS, of course. On iOS, or if you want to do anything fancy on macOS, right, what you need is this bundle. Um, and if you look at any .app under the hood, like you go to any of the
It's just basically a
applications.
folder.
Exactly. It's a folder just called .app, and then it has like a few directories inside it, and then one of those files inside it is that executable that you built, right? Um, and then the other things that are there are you have an info plist, which um, most people have seen as well, is just like it declares important things that the system should know about the app. Um, and then you have your signing, and signing is actually the trickiest bit of this when it comes to iOS. Um, on macOS, you can like pseudo sign, which is very easy to do. On iOS, you need to have like a valid code signature, which basically proves that you are a specific developer and proves that Apple has given you permission to run this app on your device. Um, so when you run an app and you run into signing errors, or you see that your app is trying to be provisioned, or like it's generating certificates or whatnot, that's kind of what's going on under the hood there. So in essence, the steps here are basically you build your main executable, and this can be done with Swift Package Manager. Um, you just need to have your target with at main in it. Um, and then you need to bundle it in this folder with the info plist uh, next to it. And the other thing you need there is you need to generate your provisioning profile, which is the sort of permission slip from Apple that says this app can run on this device. Um, and you sign your app and you include that provisioning profile. And then you've got a fully functioning iOS app. In fact, that's a .app, and then you also often distribute apps on iOS as IPA files. An IPA file is actually just a .app, but then compressed as a zip file.
That makes sense. What are, just before we touch on debugging and deployment, I do want to see, was there anything else that caught your interest that you thought was interesting about the development process, that you learned about in the process of making xTool?
Um, I think one of the other very interesting things is that the App Store Connect API is a gem, and I found
You
it
mean
incredibly
not
useful.
related to Ruby? You just mean it's you really like it, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
No, that was an unintentional pun, but I'm gonna pretend like I meant it. Yeah. No, Fastlane was a
Have
gem.
you looked at tools like Fastlane?
Yeah, I actually so I did a talk about this about the sort of roots of this project 2 years ago at this at Swift TO. Um and so that talk was just about like here's the rudimentary things that we're working on, here's a sneak peek into the future. It was a talk about iOS development, or just like the life of Swift outside of Xcode, which included cross-platform things. Um, it's amazing to see how things have matured over these 2 years. Also, like, some things are still holding us back, but there's in general there's a lot of progress here. But so like I actually did speak to Josh Holtz at that after that talk. He was at Swiftio, and he's the maintainer of Fastlane.
Right, right.
Um, and he was super excited about everything that this could do for Fastlane. So we have an open GitHub issue on both xTool and on Fastlane to track this, and I haven't quite figured out what this integration looks like yet, and I haven't spoken to Josh about it recently, but I would definitely love for that to happen at some point. Where,
Touching on some of the same stuff with signing
oh
and
yeah,
all that. So yeah,
yeah. In fact, like there were a lot of times that I had like bugs that I was trying to solve, and I would just pop open Fastly and be like, "Oh, so that's how they fixed that."
and they fixed a lot of bugs. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, very cool. So one of the other thing I wanted to mention was the way. So when I got started using xTool, there was a specific way the project was set up. You don't have like an Xcode project.
hmm
Um, and explain how that works exactly and why it's different from using just a regular Xcode project.
So there's a trend recently, and it's not just me doing this. There's a lot of folks who are starting to realize that like Xcode projects have a host of issues. Like if you've ever had to deal with a merge conflict with an Xcode project, it's a nightmare, right? Like you don't know what to do. Because like the Xcode project is all XML, and it's just a blob of like auto-generated stuff. Um, so there's a lot of there's this huge push that people are making towards declarative package management or declarative project management. And there's some other great folks who are doing this. If you've seen Xcode Gen or if you've seen Toast, yes. I actually had a really nice conversation with the Toast folks a few weeks ago after Xtool, and we've also been talking about various ways that we can integrate things together.
Yeah, that would be great. As a big fan of xTool or Toist, yeah, I would love for the things to kind of be on the same page because I'm starting to move all my projects to Toist.
Yeah, yeah, like that's the dream, right? Ideally, it would be amazing if you could take a Toast project and just build it with Xtool. Um, so yeah, the idea there is basically like let's move away from having this Xcode project, this massive Xcode project file as the source of truth, and use declarative package management with like the Swift project manifest that's very similar to package.swift that you use for Swift packages, right? Um, Kind of what you're adding on top of your package.swift is you're adding instructions on what the app looks like. Just for starters, you need a bundle ID for it, and you need to select a development team. And then there's a few other things there, like different capabilities your app might have, like background modes, or like entitlements, all of those things, right? Um, as a matter of fact, you might have noticed recently that even Apple is moving in the same direction. Where if you look at Swift Playgrounds, they actually did something very similar, where they have this library called Apple Product Types, and you can declare within your Swift package a .iOS app um, using Swift Playgrounds. Um, I realized that this was the direction we were moving, and this was the best direction to take Xtool as well. Um, for starters, at the moment, you have this. So an xtool project is basically a package.swift. It's a general Swift package. And then the only thing you add to it is this xtool.yaml file. Um, and this just all you need to begin with is a bundle ID. And when you run xtool dev, it figures out the rest. It takes your package, it tries to scan it for the iOS app target that it thinks will be the root app project, the root app target. It'll build it for you, and then it'll package it. based on what you've given it in the xtool YAML file.
How about things like the product type and things like that? That would just be done in the Swift package.
So when you say product type, do you mean like app extensions, or do you mean okay,
Product
app
type,
extensions?
platform, things like that that need to be set within a typical Xcode
Yeah,
project.
so some of these things we try to get out of the package.swift. For example, like if you want to select like a deployment target, that is actually you just use the platforms field in package Swift. It's we dump the package Swift, we scan it, and we figure out the right deployment target to use there. Um, but there's some things that you can't quite do in package Swift. So like product types, right? Like there's no way to declare and like a keyboard extension or a share extension inside of a Swift package. Um, and app extensions are one of the areas that we're actively working on right now. There was actually someone from the community who contributed a PR for this, which is amazing to see. This is just a few weeks into Swift, into xTool being released, and someone built out all of app extension support for us. And I've been working with them on polishing that up and I'm planning to land that soon. Um, but yeah, this is something that you add to your xtool YAML file where you say here is the Swift package product that corresponds to your main app, and here are the Swift package products that correspond to different app extensions. And that's basically all you need to do there. And then when you do xtool dev, after that, it'll bundle all of those things together. It'll build all of those products and then bundle them for you.
And then what did you say about what platforms? Does it just use deployment target for that or what?
So at the moment, it's more like it's based on what command line flags you pass to xtool dev. So yeah, so right now it just assumes iOS by default, like iPhone OS.SDK. If you want to build for the simulator, there's just a dash dash simulator flag that you pass. Um, and I realize that's designing me into a corner when it comes to other simulator types, or other platform types. But right now we're just starting with iOS support to keep things simple. But if we want to do watchOS, visionOS, tvOS, macOS, all of those things, we'll probably just add a flag that you can pass in.
So one of the things that is really cool is so uh, not only do you support simulator, but you can build on device and deploy on device and debug on device. And it uses remind me what the name of the tool is that you have to install.
So there's a tool called lib iMobile
Yeah.
device.
So
Um,
explain how like the whole USB thing works on Linux and how you're getting that to work so you can debug an app on device.
Sure. So I will add, just to preface that, debugging in particular is one of the trickier areas. There's actually been some major changes to Apple's debugging stack over the last 1 or 2 years. So as of iOS 17, it is something that doesn't work with xTool, but you can install apps onto your device. And before that, up until iOS 16, it's fully possible to launch and debug apps as well. And again, this is something that we're working on. It's that there's other third-party tools that have solved this. But to come back to, the crux of this, which is how do we do installation in the first place? Um, Again, a huge part of this is basically emulating what Xcode does. Um, and when you connect your device via USB, it actually opens up a port on your iOS device. Um, and it creates like this tunnel, and it basically talks to it over like TCP. So there's this protocol called lockdown D, and the way the lockdown D works is you send over from your Mac, you basically connect to this particular port on your device, and you send over this body, which is you ask it to open a service, and there's a list of services that Lockdownly supports. For example, there's a service called Apple File Conduit, AFC, um, and that allows you to transfer files between your Mac and your phone. Um, so, we first open up an Apple File Conduit service. We transfer over the IPA file. And then there's another service called Installation Proxy. We open that up and then we point it to the file that that we just transferred over, and we say install this. And that in the gist of it is basically what we do. There's a lot of other work there, of course, in terms of pairing. There's like pairing is all SSL stuff, but a lot of this work is handled by libiMobileDevice. And in fact, if you have a Linux machine and you ever connect your iPhone to a Linux machine and you see like your phone pop up on that, the reason that your Linux machine can talk to your iPhone is because libiMobileDevice is installed by default. Um, so it's a very well maintained package and it's well tested. It is written in C, which is unfortunate.
What's
Um,
most of this stuff written in? Is it written in C++, or
so
what do you use, or Swift, or what?
so so libiMobileDevice and some of the dependencies that we have are written in C, but all of xTool itself is written in Swift.
Also,
In fact, yeah, so it's like pure Swift, and like a little bit of like C to bridge between
right.
some of these things.
How has
Like
the
with
bridging been
libimobile,
between C and Swift? Um,
um,
and is anything with like Xcode 6.2 help, or Xcode 6.2, Swift 6.2, has that helped at all?
do you mean the C++ interop
Yeah, sorry,
when
C++,
you say 6?
and the fact
Yeah.
that we now have was inline array and span and stuff.
Oh, right. I haven't used any of the new stuff, the inline array and span stuff, because we're still trying to support 6.1 and 6.0 for like building. But I am very excited about that. The bridging in general has been pretty nice, actually. So, as part of X2, the way that we interact with libiMobileDevice is I built this library called SwiftMobileDevice. Um, and it's basically just a Swift wrapper around libiMobileDevice. And we have like some actors in there to allow for like nice concurrency stuff. Um, I think one of the biggest nightmares for me, was really like when Swift 6 came about, and then Swift like had the whole strict concurrency mode. Um, and just dealing with concurrency errors, and all of the trash that's come around with like every single release having new concurrency errors to deal with has been a bit difficult. But I have actually fixed some completely valid race conditions because of it. So I will say it's like you got to eat your medicine to an extent. There are ways the medicine could have been made nicer, but I think they're moving in the right direction now. Um, and with bridging in general, like SwiftMobileDevice was also a treat to work on. In fact, I shared SwiftMobileDevice with some folks a while ago, and I believe at the moment it's currently used with, if you've seen Guy Rambo's AirBuddy, um, so that uses SwiftMobileDevice under the hood, or it used to for a bit at least. And another really nice tool called Reincubate Camo. Um, and that is something that's existed for a few years, and is in fact it was featured by Apple recently, which is awesome. Um, so that also uses SwiftMobileDevice. So it's a you know validated library to that extent, and bridging has been very nice to work with.
So two things. One, would there ever be a way to remote, as a developer of a VM app, I should say, Bushel, would there ever be a way to do remote debugging from Mac to Mac?
From Mac to Mac.
Okay, we should
Ooh,
talk about
that
this
one's
offline then, because that's something I would love to
yeah,
have. Um, and
yeah.
secondly,
I don't have I don't have an answer for you immediately on the Mac
Immediately,
to Mac
immediate.
side
Okay,
of
okay.
things, but
Did you ever try debugging on a Apple Watch?
not
And can
yet,
you
not
improve
yet.
upon it in any way, please? Because the
I
communication
hope so.
is pretty bad. Okay, okay. I just thought I'd ask those two questions.
Yeah, LibIMOA device supports watch connectivity, I believe.
Okay.
So it's possible,
Yeah, it's
but
possible, but
yeah.
is it better than what we have? Okay, so a couple of things before we close out. I wanted to know what's next for xTool.
Sure. So I feel like this is that there's so many, so many pull requests that are open. There's currently like 5 different PRs that are open, and I think we touched upon some of my future plans here. One of them is definitely to figure out the right way to go about CI support. Because yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, you could just take any iOS app, and just switch your Mac OS runner for Linux and just have it work. Um, but more than that, I would also I'm just very excited about the educational opportunities. And that was really like why I created xTool to begin with. Was like, yes, so many people like don't have the tools to work with to build iOS apps, and this could really lower the barrier for them, right? And a big part of that would definitely be if we supported Xcode project to Xtool conversion. So that's something, again, talking to the Twist folks to see if we can use some of their technology for that. Um, would be awesome. And then, app extensions are another really cool thing that I'd love to support. Um, let's see, what else are we? Again, that there's actually one of the limitations is support for macros. So at the moment, one of the few things that doesn't work is some of the proprietary macros, like some of the Swift UI stuff, like at entry. So I would say like at observable works fine because that's open source and it's compiled into the Linux toolchain. Um, but yeah, some of these macros don't. So I'm working on a library. Yeah, so I'm working on a library that re-implements like at entry and at animatable or whatever the new Swift UI macros are. So that's one of the things that is coming up. Um, and yeah, just in general, like having community contribution is always amazing. So I'm always open to PRs. There's a whole roadmap if you look at the project section on Xtool. Um, and if anyone is interested in contributing that, I always appreciate it. One other big thing actually is support for alternative tools like Flutter and React Native and Kotlin multi-platform. And I was very surprised to see this, but like Xtool has generated a lot of traction in those communities. Um, yeah, I think my understanding is the reason for that is that a lot of people in those communities are the ones who currently build apps that they would like to support iOS and they'd like to test with iOS, but they can't because they don't have the tools to do it. Um, so yeah, just doing that sort of thing would be super awesome.
Well, Kabir, thank you so much for joining me today. Was there anything else you wanted to mention before we close out?
I think that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where can people find you online?
So you can find me on Twitter at Kabir Oberai. That's KABIROBERAI. Or for that matter, basically all of my other socials are just my name.
And we'll put links in
And
the
then
show notes, of course.
yeah, and I you can also check out my website at kabiroberai.com. Has not been updated since 2019, but have links in there. And
It never quarantined. Wow. Uh, well, thank you so much, Kabir, for coming on, and congratulations to your degree. This is awesome.
thank you so much for having me.
People can find me at brightdigit.com is my company's website. and I'm on social media, Leo G. Dion. Check all the socials there in the links below. If you really enjoyed this episode, please think about subscribing. And we also have a Patreon. Thank you to all Patreons for supporting this program. And if you have an idea about something you want to talk about on the show, please reach out to me and let me know. And if you're listening to this on a podcast player, of course, please like and subscribe there as well. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you again. Bye, everybody.